Oh, okay, thanks. Good afternoon and welcome everyone to the April 4th monthly work session of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Planning Commission. My name is Kiba Samuel and I chair the Planning Commission. Today's meeting is being streamed online in accordance with the state's electronic meeting statute. Requirements for notice, access, and minutes are being met through electronic means. The public and media can watch this meeting live on the Planning, Design, and Development Department's YouTube page. Participants are muted to minimize interruptions. Please do not unmute unless you are speaking. To make a motion, please state your name before making a first or second. All votes will be taken by roll call. As this is a hybrid meeting, please respond when your name is called. And we will start with the commissioners here in the room first, starting from my left.
Philip Gusman, Vice Chair, Planning Commission.
Andrew Blumenthal, Planning Commission.
John Hamm, Planning Commission.
Astrid Chirinos, Planning Commission.
And joining us virtually, Commissioner Barbie,
Karen Barbie, Planning Commission.
Commissioner Gaston,
Melissa Gaston, Planning Commission.
Commissioner Harvey,
RJ Harvey, Planning Commission.
Commissioner McMillan,
Commissioner McMillan, Planning Commission.
Commissioner Rhodes,
Courtney Rhodes, Planning Commission.
Commissioner Russell,
Will Russell, Planning Commission.
Commissioner Spencer,
Sam Spencer, Planning Commission.
Commissioner Welton.
Douglas Welton, Planning Commission.
We'll now do introductions for staff, starting with those that are in the room from my left.
Candace Rory, Planning Department.
Siobhan Davis, Planning Staff. Monica Holmes, Planning Staff.
And joining us virtually, I believe I saw our interim director. Okay. Okay. Ms. Osborne.
Alicia Osborne, Planning Staff.
Kevin.
Good afternoon, Kevin May, Planning Staff.
Mariah.
Hi, this is Mariah Wozniak, Planning Staff.
Andrew.
Andrew Russell, Planning Staff.
And Krista. Krista, are you with us?
Sorry, I couldn't unmute. Krista Lineberger, Historic District Commissioner.
Thank you. Anyone that I'm missing? Anyone? Okay, so thanks again, everyone, for joining us for our monthly April 2022 monthly work session for the Planning Committee. Referencing our minutes that are in our agenda packet, any discussion, corrections, notes? I just have one, if no one else. On the last page of the first paragraph of the last page, where it begins, Chairperson Samuel inquired as to what order. It should say community area plans and not aerial, unless we're doing aerial plans also. Okay, then it should say area, it should say area plans. Anyone else have any corrections or items of discussion? Hearing none, motion please.
It's Commissioner Welton. I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes as they appear before us with the noted correction.
Spencer, second.
Motion by Walton, second by Spencer. Commissioner Barbie,
Yes.
Gaston,
Yes.
Harvey,
Yes.
McMillan,
Yes.
Rhodes,
Yes.
Russell,
Yes.
Spencer,
Aye.
Ham,
Aye.
Chirinos,
Yes.
Blumenthal,
Yes.
Gusman.
Yes.
Chair votes aye. Minutes pass unanimous. Thank you. We will move on to new business now. Last month I announced that those persons who might have an interest in serving on the nominating committee to reach out to Phil or myself. I consider us lucky to have amongst us 3 tenured commissioners who have all in some shape, form, or capacity served on the executive committee themselves, who I trust to deliver a very thorough and thoughtful process in vetting nominees for any who might come forward. Our nominating committee are as follows. Commissioner Ham, Commissioner McMillan, and Commissioner Spencer. Thank all of you for, in advance for serving. I believe at least Commissioner Ham and Spencer, I know, have served on nominating committee before, so they are very knowledgeable about how that process works, and look forward to the nominations that they may come forth with. Any questions, any thoughts, any comments from our nominating committee or those who have questions of nominating committee? Hearing none. So all of anyone who might have an interest in serving on executive committee, an executive committee consists of the chair of the planning commission, vice chair of the planning commission. Please submit your nomination for yourself or those who want to nominate someone. You'll need to submit that information prior to our May monthly meeting. I would say date certain. If we're meeting on the 2nd, I would say date certain would be the 22nd of April. April 22nd. If you have an interest in serving as chair or vice chair of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Planning Commission, you will need to submit your information to Commissioners Ham, McMillan, and Spencer by April 22nd, date certain. Any questions, any comments, any thoughts? Anyone? Floor is open.
And just really quick, this is Sam. Commissioner Ham and Commissioner McMillan, we can meet offline or email offline to decide a date to look over these. But if there's no objection from my fellow nominating committee members, typically the process here is that we've asked for a resume and a statement. So, basically like a cover letter, but, explaining why you would want the position and a resume in addition to, any nomination that might come from a third party.
Thank you, Commissioner Spencer. Any other questions, comments? Okay. Then we'll jump to our next agenda topic on new business. And we've got a longtime friend of the commissioner and partnering on the planning department, and she's now ventured into some other areas of specialty and expertise. We have Monica Holmes in the room with us. And I will just notate that it's good seeing folks in the room, being around the energy. I hope that more of us can join in future months. So I'm going to turn it over to Monica and she'll present to us some information on the TOD study.
Great. It's wonderful being with you guys here today. I, yes, spent a lot of time here for a while and I haven't been back and we've been in a pandemic. So it's nice to see everyone. Let me see if I can get it. There we go. That's still sharing, right? Hide the video like that. Okay. Okay, so I'm here today to talk with you about the work that our team's been doing with CATS on the Link Silver Line. And this is really a partnership between the planning department and CATS. So John Howard, who is my partner in this project, will likely be joining us here today. He sends his apologies. He had an offsite meeting and will be here shortly to answer questions. So we're tag teaming this. Okay, so we've come to you in the past and talked a little bit about this project, which has really reached the end of this first phase and the end of our first kind of big push of work. So we started working on the transit-oriented development station area planning about 3 years ago with, just to refresh your memory, with a grant that was approximately $1 million grant to hire a consulting firm and look at all these different aspects of our future transit station areas along the Silver Line. So what you're looking at right now is all of the different stations that our study looked at. And as you can notice, it is a lot of stations, more stations that are on the Blue Line and the Blue Line extension combined. We included Stallings and Indian Trail, which are kind of not even a part of this initial phase, and did a lot of work even in Gaston County and Union County on kind of building network. So John and I divided up that work around what was within the city of Charlotte, how could we coalition build amongst our partners in other cities. And what you'll see here is really the culmination of all that work. So the goal was to, let's see if I can hide this. Oh, no, we'll just keep going. The goal was to have one vision and really tie together all of the different things that were going on. So while we were doing this work, it is still ongoing concurrent to the actual engineering of the Silver Line being designed. So think of it as this: the Silver Line being designed is putting train tracks in the ground, building the station platform, you know, where it's very detailed into where the actual transit line is going to go. The work that we were doing was everything around that. So how do all the pieces connect together? How do you access the station? How do you get from your house to the station? How do you get to a job? What are the land use patterns around that? And then how does that tie and fit within this framework of all the other planning efforts going on simultaneously? So the strategic mobility plan, the Charlotte 2040 plan, our transit corridor system plan, you know, you can kind of see the wide range of things going on. So the study started in 2020. We got kicked off right before the pandemic, and we actually had our first round of interviews our public interviews in person at the very beginning of March 2020. We then did a lot of our work for the next year really with the design team. So that was really being a voice in the room to talk about where the station's located is impacted by the things going on around it. So we worked hand in hand with the design team, with the engineers who were determining, you know, we want a station like a first ward station, right? We were there with them kind of talking through the pros and the cons of that and how it might be located. And that was really what we did for that first big push of efforts. So that was all through summer 2020. We then had our consultants look at existing conditions. They did an economic analysis on how ready are all these station areas for transit-oriented development. We did 2 lessons learned workshops, which you'll hear about when I get to the ULI slide. And we talked through kind of what the different things are both from an equitable TOD standpoint and from lessons learned in small towns. Then in 2021, was when the refined alignment was first adopted. So that was when that actual line in the ground was changed. All that work we had been doing over the summer kind of culminated in that. And then last summer, which I know that at least a couple of you were there, we had 2 weeks of in-person workshops, all the way spanning from Belmont to Matthews, where we was right in the sweet spot where we could have these big outdoor pop-ups and show people in real time what we were designing and what we were thinking about in each station area. So after those workshops, we put everything online. We did more public engagement. People were able to give their comments. And then we have now finally ready the final kind of TOD plan. So you guys are getting the first glance at it today. It will go live before next Monday. So we'll be presenting to City Council TAP Committee next Monday, and that everything will be up on that CAT Silverline website, which is the website we've been using throughout the process. So again, that's a public facing summary of the entire study is what you'll find online and in this transit-oriented development study document. It has all of the existing conditions summarized. It has general recommendations for every station area, so all 29 stations. It has affordable housing and market findings from a high level. We know we have more work to do there. And then the 7 demonstration areas, it has detailed planning, and I'll show you what each one of those looks like. And then it has the high level summary for kind of the extensions. So just a reminder, what is transit-oriented development, or TOD? It's really about a compact mixture of uses, having engaging spaces. So how the building meets the sidewalk, meets the street, and how you put those elements together to create a more walkable place. It should be accessible to all users. And it's really, I think this is happening in real time, is that it is development that's focused on equity and really serving people and meeting them where they need to be met. So that's both from a housing perspective and from a small business and jobs perspective. So we know that this is one of the renderings from the plan. We know, again, that you can see how these elements all come together. So both a 5-minute walk from the station, that's really where the highest intensity transit-oriented development is typically focused. Again, it's the mix of uses. It's having a strong access and connections through sidewalks. You want to have good wayfinding so people can figure out how to access the transit station. You want to have, and you'll see this, we have different typologies of stations. So how is the station actually functioning? Is it a station that serves as a major bus connection to a lot of other routes? Is it a station, think about a station in South End where it's what we call a walk-up station, where there's no parking at the station, right? The station is embedded into the urban fabric and you just walk up and get on the train. So all of those different elements, and then you think about a station like out at UNCC where there's a big parking garage, right? All of those kind of have to work together to create a successful transit-oriented development. So I'm going to walk a little bit through our public outreach and what we did. You can see here, this is our pop-up meeting from this past summer in Romare Bearden. And we did those meetings really in June and July of last year. The demonstration station areas were the ones in those 2 weeks in July. And they included continual feedback and concepts from the design team. So different stations had different partners. So it was really interesting to work through with each partners. We had different jurisdictions. NCDOT, North Carolina Department of Transportation, have more of an interest in some station areas than others. So we really tried to work through those broad stakeholder groups. And you can just see here some of our kind of how many people we had in person, how many people we had on the surveys, and then how many people we had come to those community meetings outdoors. So we heard a lot of different things during that time. We heard, this is just a summary of each different station area. And again, all this information is in the report. So don't feel like you have to, read everything right now. You can take a deep dive into it once we send you guys the link. But basically what you'll see is that people had different opinions in different station locations. The one thing that we heard over and over again was protecting housing, having bikeable, walkable access to stations. Those were, and having public space. Those were the three things that pretty much stuck no matter where you were. So if you were in downtown Matthews, you would hear that. If you were in Belmont, you would hear that. And if you were at any of the stations in between, that was loud and clear. So I mentioned earlier that ULI panel that we did last year, and I wanted to just reiterate that as part of the public engagement, because it happened what seemed like so long ago that I think people have forgotten that these resources actually still exist. So if you want to learn more about TOD and ETOD, that's what people call equitable transit-oriented development for short. These workshops that we hosted included people and experts from Austin, Texas, Phoenix, Arizona, Seattle, Atlanta, and some of the amazing things that those cities are doing that is really forward thinking and incorporating at the ground equitable transit-oriented development. These are all still available online. We had over 100 participants in each session. They were done virtually, and I think they will serve as a great resource like going forward as we continue the conversation in Charlotte around transit and what transit means for our community. So outside of the station area, the development study, which you'll see that has all the station area plans, our consultants also, we work together on a station area typology manual. And this is what I was talking about when I mentioned the different features that a station might have. So how do you access the station? Can you park at it? Are there rideshare options? How do we intertwine all of the different forms of mobility into a transit station? So are there bike ped accommodations? So you'll notice if you start paying attention and you ride the train, you can start seeing how all these elements come together at different stations and how important it is to think into the future and our new transit lines, how these pieces might fit together. So here, the work that we did really shows all of the different 29 stations and all of the typologies. So each typology has variables on these items, these different features. So a ride up station, for example, has rideshare options to it. It might have limited parking to it, not what we would consider a commuter station. Whereas you take a walk-up station, and a walk-up station is going to have bike ped accommodations and micro mobility, but it would have zero parking and it would be difficult to access via a car. So again, all this information is going to be in the report. I just wanted to show you guys kind of how broad all the different things that we were working on as part of this. So this was done in very close coordination with the design team, because you think about it, they have to design the station to accommodate these different typologies too, right? So they have to know, are they designing a parking deck? Are they designing, what does it look like? How much space does it need to take up? So these things were kind of done in conjunction with them. So you can see here too that we have things designated like a destination transfer. So that means where you would be making, you would have the ability to make major transfers. So the station itself would have to work as an even kind of bigger footprint than what you might initially think. So things like Gateway Station, 11th Street, Bojangles, that's where all of whole bevy of routes would come together and you would be able to transfer. So I'm just going to show you what one station area concept looks like, because we would be here till 3 o'clock if we went through all of them, and then you guys can kind of dive into them when we send them your way. So again, we had 7 demonstration station area plans. And then we did the additional recommendations for Gastonia, Stallings, and Indian Trail. And then you'll see kind of what our high level recommendations are for the remaining. So it was all about, in the 7 stations we did, we actually grouped, Matthews had 2, we grouped them together. So that's why you see 6 illustrations. But we used different typologies because we knew that all stations are not necessarily the same. And so if we were going to look at demonstration station areas, we wanted them to have different characteristics so that we could take some of the lessons learned from each different station type and then apply it to another station that might be similar. So for example, you take something like the Matthews stations, they're very suburban in nature. And so it's how might you do a suburban station and how might you infill development there? You look at a station like the West Charlotte stations and you're transitioning to single family very quickly from that station. And it's a lot about how do we strategically infill in a way that respects the existing patterns and the existing home ownership. So how can we take lessons learned there? So I'm just going to walk you through what that West Charlotte demonstration station looks like. So it included the Ashley, Remount, and Berry Hill stations. So it was 3 stations. We had our affordable housing and our housing consultants look at how many housing units existed in that portion of the corridor. So you can see there's 3,800 units in that portion of the corridor. And then we asked them to look at what does the market want in affordability in this corridor? And so you can see those numbers below that. Then we asked our just office retail consultant to look at how desirable are these stations today? And like, what does the market want to do there? So these numbers you see down here, 2, 1, 3, all these, the lower the number, the lower the demand is right now, the higher the number, the higher the demand. So every station we have this catalog for. And so you can kind of see where the highest desirability might be today. This is without any kind of intervention. So these are obviously changeable because you take something like an opportunity site and a metric of an opportunity site, that's what exists today. If the city were to buy acreage, or if the dynamic was to majorly change and let's say like a Walmart goes away, right? Then that's going to really change the dynamic of how much opportunity there is in that area. So you can see it can all change. Then we did the renderings for each demonstration area to kind of show people what it might look like. So you can see here that west and then there's also more information below on exactly what it's showing. So this is just more details around that. And again, lots of details that you can dive into. We really kept saying over and over again, like for the west specifically, calling it like a walkable Wilkinson, because that really, everything we did in that corridor specifically centered around how can you make Wilkinson what stitches together and stitches you to the Silver Line versus divides you away from it. So you'll see here a lot of ideas around that. And then they did calculations just based on kind of what they drew, what was drawn. So also included in the transit-oriented development study are infrastructure recommendations for every single station area. And the great thing about this is we created a GIS system that can be used across all the departments so that if a new development is coming in and we want to know, okay, how would the Silver Line, how would we want that development to connect to the Silver Line? You could look at this infrastructure map and say, oh, in the TOD study, they really thought that it was important to have bike lanes on this road, or they thought it was important that the sidewalk connect here to be able to get you to the station. So just a little City of Charlotte history for both the Blue Line and the Blue Line extension. We came back and had a big capital project that was a city-led initiative in parallel to us building the transit line. So there are some great examples of those projects that are like the rail trail existing today, some of the cross connections across the Blue Line. They called it SKIP for the first version. They called it NISI for the second version. But basically this network that we created here and this online mapping is like the very first take at what an infrastructure plan or project might look like for the Silver Line. Obviously, there's a lot of work to be done because there's a lot of projects listed and that's not necessarily all feasible, but it helps us to kind of begin the early prioritization. We also started to look at what areas are appropriate for TOD, and we coordinated really closely with the place types mapping team to determine what was appropriate to be future transit-oriented development or basically redevelop, and what was really protected established neighborhoods. And so that kind of leads us to the latest and greatest work, which is where we're going from here, which is really a focus more around, we feel like we know, we have a catalog of the infrastructure, the land banking parcels, what should be TOD, all the demonstration areas. And now we're starting to build a portfolio of, okay, so now what? How can we really build this out as equitable transit-oriented development? And how can we build a silver line differently than we did on our initial lines? So our consultants did a catalog of all of the resources that we currently have in the city of Charlotte that really touch affordability around transit, just so that we would know kind of what the tools in the toolbox are currently today. And then they started to really put together a framework around what equitable TOD might look like, kind of taking everything we know, which is really first and foremost building capacity, and then embedding it into our process and making it easier, more predictable, and required. So this is the work that we are kind of just barely scratching the surface on now, that we plan on building out over the next couple of years, which is really diving into each one of these and seeing which one of these are appropriate and how can we achieve these things, and what's something we can do in the short term, medium term, long term. And then most importantly, what does each community see as the best fit for their station area and their community? So that includes both policies around housing and anti-displacement, and how we can maybe improve our portfolio around those, and how we can maybe even include things like land banking, and really focusing more on all the tools we might need to be able to address the Silver Lines growth. So I'll just focus on land banking. I know it's been something that we brought up here. And I will say, you'll see in our report, and this is what we plan to build on in our next phase, that we have kind of started an initial scan of publicly owned property that could be potential sites for Silver Line land banking. Now, obviously, this is just a scan. There's a lot of work to be done with partner organizations on what their expectations are for the site, but we think that it's exciting and it's good to get ahead of the curve and start really looking at where it is appropriate and where we can go ahead and get it in the system. So I've been kind of alluding to this, but what's next for all of this effort is we just recently were awarded a $400,000 grant from the federal government to specifically focus on equitable transit-oriented development. And we estimate that to start next fall. So right now we're in the process of finalizing the scope and writing the scope of exactly what it is we want to dive into. We know that we want it to be very implementation focused and very community built. I've been very transparent with the fact that we want to hire a community-based group to lead this work. We want it to be very focused around education and capacity building, with an emphasis on our environmental justice and underserved populations. So our goal is to really get into those communities and understand what's important and of value to them. I think that if we've learned anything from our larger effort thus far, it's that it's very difficult to get everyone to the table to have conversations about this, and we need to do more work on that front. And our phase 2 will look at, with an equity lens, our infrastructure prioritization and how we can really advance the work into implementation. So with that, I will show you, this is kind of the next steps shown more graphically. That ETOD work is going to continue in parallel out with our environmental impact study and the final design. We just got our 15% design plans this week, so we will be going through those. 30% will be this fall. That's how you actually design the line itself. The ETOD work will follow in parallel with that, and we'll continue kind of working together with the team. So with that, questions, comments, it's a lot of information. We'll send out all the resources. I feel like there's a lot of things you might have questions, and I'm happy to take them.
I know there are a few commissioners who are just chomping at the bit to speak on this. Candace, if you could line up who's might be first, second, or third in the chat. And while we do that, I have first a few notes. Thank you for being able to quickly digest the information and data points from the ULI forum. We were questioning whether or not you were ready to do that. So thank you so very much for those highlights. I mentioned a minute ago that there are a few commissioners who are chomping at the bit to kind of explore what you have given us today. I'm one of them, particularly the GIS infrastructure map, seeing how that operates. And then one question that I have is the affordability around transit slide that you showed. I believe it was just before the ETOD strategy slide. There were several bullet points around housing. Did that part of the study take a look at all around affordable business space?
So it was mentioned, and it was part of I don't have a slide on it, but when you get the report, there is a spread of about 25 or 30 different ETOD policies to consider. And so I know it is a focus of our upcoming work to make sure that we are including small businesses in the conversation, because I feel like people do tend to lean towards housing and displacement and not think about the displacement of businesses too. So there are some strategies in there, and it is a core component of our upcoming work to talk through that. We've heard that loud and clear, especially on the fringes too. I know it's very important to Matthews that we talk about business displacement and in the Monroe corridor and think about how that might impact that corridor. I think Wilkinson will have the same outcome, but we've just heard about it more so initially on the east side.
In the recent grant that you captured, the 400K, can you speak to at all? I heard the word affordability. It helps us put a focus on affordability, how we might establish some best practices as we push forward with this silver line planning and design. Is there anything specific, or can you tell me how those dollars might be used as it relates to anti-displacement particularly?
So the $405,000 grant that we received is to do the work. So we estimate that a good portion of that is going to go into engagement and education, with some of that for basically community organizers, community engagement, transit experts, people who can bring to the table some implementation strategies from other municipalities. That will lead to basically very clear strategies that then will have dollars and cents attached to them as to how it gets done. So I think that conversation is likely coming, but there's work to be done on like basically where that money comes from, how does it get applied, what are their priorities? So our goal is to get to that place, basically.
Thank you. Again, thank you so very much for bringing forth this information. We feel privileged to be the first to take a look at this. So thank you.
Oh, of course.
Commissioner Russell, I believe, has his hand raised.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I wanted to go back to the whole small business thing, because I think that's going to be very important as we go forward. I think that in the past, we as a city and as a planning body have not taken that seriously enough, especially when we're coming in and completely redoing infrastructure of that type. So are there any plans for specific plans for not only creating small business opportunities, but for including that in land banking?
You mean land banking specific for businesses and such? Is that, you broke up for just a second?
Yes, specifically for small locally owned businesses.
I will not say, we just haven't gotten that far as to specifically like what land banking might be used for or who the partners might be to leverage those opportunities. So, I mean, I think you're right in that will be much more of a focus, and we're going to hear that, especially once the design team gets further along into where the impacts really are. and kind of what the phasing and construction looks like. I think we know that we have to shore up the business and small business opportunity side of it. So I think we're excited that we have a grant and that we have some funds to basically further deep dive into that and come up with the real strategy. We're just not there yet to have like a clear answer for you as to exactly what that will look like.
Anything else from Commissioner Russell?
Nope. Thank you, Monica. That was good. I would like to see once you guys get further along, kind of the strategies you have around that.
Okay. And we have Blumenthal and then Torinos.
Yeah, Commissioner Blumenthal, first of all, thank you again for your time. Just had a few questions. One, you mentioned kind of the accessory trails, essentially a rail trail, right? Is there any sort of firm commitment to a rail trail that will run the length of the line, or is that just aspirational at this point?
It's in design. So, I mean, yes and no. It's not a fully funded, the line also isn't fully funded. It's not a fully funded line at this point. We're advancing the design of the rail trail further along, meaning that when I say the design, I mean, we are engineering as though there will be a rail trail adjacent to the transit line. There are some gaps where that's not possible, and we are internally working to identify ways to further study those areas so that, like if you're crossing 277 on a bridge, how do we find that gap, right? Like, do we need the trail beside it? What does that look like? So I think we as a city have seen how successful the existing rail trail is, and we are committed to figuring it out. There will be a day where, it is a value add, right? And we have to have a conversation of how it actually gets fully funded and implemented and all those things. But right now the project team is advancing it as though it is adjacent to the transit line.
That's great. Thank you. I think the lack of a rail trail on the extension is glaring, right? And so making sure that we address that. And again, knowing there may be gaps, but to the extent we can improve that connectivity. A second question, a little bit quicker. I'm assuming that on this one, you mentioned the densest development being a 5-minute walk from a station. Is that also kind of in terms of a distance, quarter mile versus half mile versus mile? Is that going to correspond the same as the current
Yeah, a
zone?
5-minute is a quarter mile.
Right.
Transit-oriented development, we also generally see it up to a 10-minute walk, up to a half of a mile, but usually you see the most dense development in that first 5-minute, quarter mile radius.
Got it. And then last question, along with that most recent ULI report, and I know Commissioner Gussman, Commissioner Welton, and I at least were at the happy hour afterwards, right? And full disclosure, I have not read the full report, but I know that they did recommend the line going through the center of Uptown as opposed to a perimeter around it. That being said, I also know that there's a lot of planning that's already gone into the current layout to this point. What, if any, attention is being paid to that? And do you think that's realistic?
Well, I'm not an engineer, so I don't want to say if it's realistic or not from an actual ability to do it.
Right.
We haven't gotten the final report yet from ULI from the work that was done at the beginning of March. All we have right now is their final presentation. So if you saw their final presentation, that's what we have. We're expecting the final report in the next week or two. And then we are kind of tentatively examining the pieces that they brought out and brought forward. So CATS has actually done a great job of cataloging all the recommendations, and they've been going through each of the recommendations and kind of just doing a gut check on feasible. How would we do it if we wanted to do it? What might that look like? So we're definitely taking it seriously. And it just takes a little bit of time to figure out how feasible some of those things are, because Carson's very built out. There's just a couple of points where it's not quite a yes no, there's some things you have to figure out engineering wise if it's possible. So I know that Andy Mock, who's the senior project manager for the Silver Line, is planning to go to council in June with an update of kind of all of those points from the ULI study. And I know that his team is working right now to kind of answer some of those broad questions as to what are the pros, cons, like what is the, how would we actually be able to do that? Because we really very much value their opinion from ULI. And I think that it did shed some light, and it was a very sophisticated analysis. So we're taking it seriously and we just need a little bit of time to basically figure it out.
Right. Well, and again, under the heading of full disclosure on this, I wholeheartedly support the same as ULI, right? With it running through the center of town for a number of reasons. I guess my ask would just be, and again, knowing how busy you and the broader team are, it doesn't have to be a full presentation like this, but as you continue to analyze on your end, if there's anything that comes as a result of that, or when things come as a result of that, if that could at least be shared with the commission. And again, it doesn't have to be a formal presentation, but I would really very much like to kind of stay on top of that as you guys do.
Yeah, we can definitely make sure that happens. And obviously, because of the process that CATS works through with the Metropolitan Transit Commission, like any major changes can bring them and talk with you guys about them. They'll have to go through a vetting process and then be adopted by the Metropolitan Transit Commission.
Right.
But no, I think we're more than happy we can talk offline or, as we kind of progress on that.
That would be great. Then that's it for me. Thank you very much again.
Okay, and then we have Commissioners Chirinos and Ham.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Monica, I would like to echo our chair's sentiments. This is great information. Finally, it just comes alive on everything that we're doing, connecting the dots, literally, as you did. So thank you so much. If you could go back maybe a couple or slides, no, the one right after that one. So in terms of your strategies, in the spirit of equity, I'm trying to figure out where in this conversation are we aligning the childcare, and we're integrating that in I don't see, or how are we aligning with our school system? Because one of the biggest challenges that our families have is to be able to have that early care, transfer care, whichever, while they are going through this. How is that? Are there any provisions about supporting families, services that can provide from a TOD that can actually make life easier for people as they are riding and going from one job to another job and another job, especially for the communities that have, our communities of color that have more challenges going across the city?
We did not get that deep into it in this effort, but there are a couple examples nationally that they brought up at the early ULI workshops that we had of where that has been incentivized, like having childcare in a transit-oriented development is incentivized, where there is a lot of conscientious thought around how that system works together. And I think that's an exciting comment for our next 2 years of work that is solely focused on equitable transit-oriented development policies, like something we need to really think about a little more deeply is how that system works together. And as we become a more sophisticated city with transit, how are we connecting people to, it's not just all about shiny new glass towers and new development, but it's about what are the services we're providing. To Andrew's point around the most recent ULI work that we did, there were a lot of conversations around some of the publicly owned property, on the northern side of town, and how those might not just be kind of a big economic development opportunity, but also an opportunity to create a cultural hub, to create, some more services hub, potentially education. And I think all that's very exciting. It's just, how do we put that in place? So I'm personally looking forward to kind of deep diving into that and learning as we hear more from the community, like what's important to them, and then how can we meet those services with policies and funding with this line.
And that I just want to add the same thing with the health part. I'm developing citywide health and safety plans. I'm not exactly sure how that combines, but I'm hoping that also we're able to provide support in terms of mental health and other, maybe urgent care or something like that as people are moving through the city. It's an opportunity to be able to think outside the box. So thank you for all your efforts. This is awesome.
Thank you for that comment, Commissioner Chirinos. Very, very, very valid points. Commissioner Ham, and then we'll check back to see who might have a comment online, and then Mr. Vice Chair will wrap up the conversation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Very good presentation, Monica. And actually, we were thinking alike on the health and safety, but community engagement, tell me a little bit more about that. And are you looking at it from a lens of feedback from the community in terms of what their desires are, or community engagement from usage and taking advantage of what's available for transportation? Just fill me in a little bit more, please.
I think so in the efforts that we're getting ready to launch. So in our community engagement that we did for this effort, it was very focused around built environment. Like, what kind of development do you want to see? What are the assets that are missing, or what are things you want to be strengthened? So almost more of a survey feedback loop method. In our upcoming effort, again, we're still kind of finalizing the scope, and we'll basically hire people over the summer to do this work. So I don't want to answer too much because I'm very interested in what people's ideas are, but the way we wrote the grant is that it is very focused on capacity building. And so both like hearing what do people want, what do they lack now, what is important to them, and then how does transit help or not help them achieve those things, and what are the things that are missing, and what are the policies that need to be in place. So it's going to be a leap from kind of what we hear to what we can actually put on the ground. And so it's going to take a very unique team to help us kind of mind that gap and figure out, like, how do you translate what we're hearing in the community to policies that we implement. So I've had some very early conversations with people who are doing the work, like through organizations like the United Way, and really focus on capacity building and how successful they have been, or what they're hearing, and how we might be able to either partner with them or work together with their boots on the ground to leverage it. But our goal is to flip it on its head and to not hire basically a big transit consultant, but to hire somebody who is much more grassroots, like based in Charlotte, to lead this work, and then bring in people that, if they need expertise on the subject matter, they would be secondary.
Awesome. Any other hands raised online? Okay, Mr. Vice Chair.
Excellent. Thank you. I got to say, I'm thrilled to be working with you on another TOD anything, because the last one I think worked pretty well. Good community outreach, and I think a good outcome for our city. I commend you for the innovative way your heads up, or in your turn it upside down approach. I think that's fantastic. And I think that will do a lot to reach the concerns that we've been hearing as we've been working through some of our other planning efforts in the city in order to get a better outcome. So I commend you on all of that. I would say my fellow commissioners brought up some really good points. It sounds like they're, if not explicit, they're kind of baked in, and we have a little bit of yet to see on how that plays out, but we're early on in this process, and thrilled again that we're having this conversation now. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
So before we move on, I think to Blumenthal's point, we look forward to seeing you in the future, very near. Thank you so very much, Monica.
Thanks, you guys.
And has Laura joined us?
So Laura's had a family emergency, and so I will be doing the presentation with Mariah, and we have the whole UDO team online to answer any technical questions you may have.
All right. So I'll let you tee up intro for who will, you will lead us through the presentation. Okay.
Thank you. So I just wanted to kind of tee up a little bit what we're going to talk about today. So this is really an overview of what has been going on since the draft UDO was released on October 7th. The comment portal closed on March the 18th. And so I want to spend a little bit of time talking about the different ways we have engaged with the community on the draft regulation, the draft UDO, and what we've heard from them as a result of the different types of engagement that staff and the team have done in the community. Talk a little bit about what we've heard from those different engagement sessions, and then end with the schedule and sort of the outlook for UDO adoption, hopefully later this year. So with that, I will turn it over to Mariah. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Allison. My name is Mariah Wozniak. I am stepping in a little bit for Laura today. And like Allison said, joined by the rest of the UDO team to answer some questions at the end. Next slide, please.
Oh, sorry. Hold on 1 second. I have to share it. That will be why she can't see it.
Oh, great. Awesome. Okay. So this slide may be familiar to some of you, but I think it's helpful to see the major planning projects kind of lined up side by side. So on the top line is the policy map, and you can see council passed the policy map last week. And then the strategic mobility plan is below that, with the schedule for the UDO at the bottom line of this multi-project schedule. So as currently planned, we anticipate the second draft of the UDO to be released in May, with the public hearing in June, and then coming for a council decision in July on the UDO. Next slide. Great. So after we hosted some in-person open house events, which I know several of you all were able to attend and kind of helped us coordinate with, which was a huge help, we kind of launched into some virtual conversations. And these were short presentations with an opportunity for participants to ask questions via Zoom's chat feature. And we covered a range of topics on the UDO, from zoning districts to trees to admin and the others you see here. And during these sessions, we had over 300 total participants across all of them. And it was really a great way to kind of help staff understand the kinds of questions that existed around the UDO, and anticipate sort of the comments and plan for future engagement opportunities. And recordings of these conversations are available on our website. Next slide. Following our virtual conversations, we prepared and hosted listening sessions that were focused on 4 UDO topics that garnered significant interest across our comment portal and other engagement. And as you see here, these topics were heritage trees, short-term rentals, neighborhood 1 zoning districts, and parking. And each session topic was offered twice on one day, each time to kind of allow for a variety of schedules for people to participate. And during these sessions, we had a short staff presentation, but the emphasis was really on an open forum where participants could ask or could leave their comments and kind of ask some questions about the topic at hand. But staff really focused here on listening versus responding during these sessions. And then as a carry on to that, each of the comments or questions posed during the session was entered into our online portal so that staff could follow up and have a more thorough review of those comments and questions. So we also had several folks who attended these sessions that did not wish to speak, but had a lot of great comments, but we also had a lot of great comments come out of this to help us understand where we need to adjust or maybe where we don't need to make changes in the UDO. And also, I guess you can see here too, we had really valuable information that we gleaned during each session. Our short-term rental sessions were quite popular. And Interim Director Craig will be speaking about some of the specific comments that we heard from these in just a few minutes. Next slide, please. So now that the listening sessions have wrapped, we are focusing on some other alternative ways to reach the community as staff really works to dig in and address the comments and work on the red line draft. So one of the ways is a show on the government channel, Charlotte's UDO and You. So planning staff is working with corporate communications and marketing to create this new show on the government channel that is hosted by Interim Director Craig. And new episodes are aired on the last Thursday of each month at 7 p.m. And this is really designed to kind of share general information about the UDO with the community, illustrate how it affects them, and take a deeper dive into specific topics that have garnered interest. All of the previous episodes, which there's only been one, I believe, so far, and they're all on the YouTube page, and then subsequent ones will be aired live and then also on YouTube as well. Next slide. So one important aspect to kind of highlight was our public comment portal, which was open and collecting public comments through March 18th. And we received over 1,200 comments from outside of the city organization on the UDO. So as staff, we are reviewing and considering each comment, going through and responding. And our intention is to be thorough and thoughtful with our responses. So it is taking a bit of time. But the staff is actively working to finalize those comments as we speak, and they are posted on our website on a rolling basis, so folks can review comment responses by topic on the UDO by going to our website. And we would love to have you check out kind of where we're landing on a lot of these topics and see how we're addressing them, addressing the comments, ideas, and feedback. And some of the topics are still pending, but we are actively working and addressing kind of those big hot button issues like we'll be talking about in just a few minutes. So with that, I'd like to hand it back over to Allison to talk through some of the comment highlights.
Thanks, Mariah. So as Mariah mentioned, surprisingly, short-term rentals was the probably the most frequently commented topic in all the 1,200 plus comments that we received. This, of course, is a new use that's established in the UDO, allowed in N1 and N2. And so some of the comments related to some of the standards that are in the first draft of the UDO, which include a 400-foot separation distance. They required you to get a zoning use permit, prohibited events, and required that a local manager be present. So we've gotten comments from local operators saying that this will really overly restrict the ability to operate, particularly as it relates to the separation distance. Of course, if you have a multi-unit building, having a separation distance is quite challenging, which we learned pretty quickly in the comments that was something that definitely would need to be addressed. We've also heard from the neighbors and the community about just some of the impacts that they experience from short-term rentals, including noise and parking and trash. So I think this is one that we're getting pretty close to coming up with some recommendations on what will be in the next draft of the UDO. And so we'll come back to you all hopefully soon to talk through what some of those recommendations might be. Trees, this is another frequently commented topic. So this is a new standard in the UDO. We're thinking about the results from the tree canopy action plan. We heard from the community and from a number of people throughout the city about how important preservation is of trees and really wanting to address the rapid loss that has occurred in our residential areas. And so I believe it's about 65% of the tree canopy loss that Charlotte has experienced has been in single family areas or in your individual lots and not really as a result of commercial development. And so wanting to both think about preservation of existing large trees as well as starting to try and protect some of the trees that are in those single family areas. So mitigation is allowed as long as a permit is received from staff. We've gotten lots of questions about hazardous trees. Can these be removed? And certainly we're not wanting to impede any life safety issues. So dead, diseased, or hazardous, this can be removed without a permit. A number of comments on cost of mitigation, cost of just it's not just the tree that you have to protect, but it's the root zone surrounding it. And so concerns about whether or not that will be too costly and impact future development. We also hear from the community that appreciate taking this approach, that we want to protect our large healthy trees, and they're excited that we're taking a proactive approach to tree canopy preservation. Parking, another popular topic in the comment portal. So in the UDO, there's a 3-tier approach, and looking at minimums and maximums. So in tier 1, these zoning districts have parking minimums, but there is no maximum. Tier 2 has both. And then tier 3 has maximums for most uses. In tier 3, I think you would have seen this before with TOD. TOD kind of started down this road of having parking maximums. And so carrying that forward with other similar urban districts. We've had a number of comments that let the market decide what the parking is. But then some concerns, particularly when you've got neighborhood areas that are close to high intensity, whether it's TOD or activity centers, concern that there may be parking spill over into the neighborhoods. So looking right now at what we might be able to make changes there. I'm sure many of you have heard that Raleigh eliminated parking minimums, as a number of other cities has done as well. So certainly the UDO team is looking at that as an option in addition to weighing the other comments. Other frequent comments, I'll just hit on a few of these. Building height transitions, certainly there's always a lot of discussion about building heights, and this was really something that we talked about both with the policy map and with the UDO, is the adjacencies between your activity centers and your neighborhood. How are we addressing those transitions? And sometimes that's sometimes that's a policy map thing, sometimes it's a UDO thing. And so really trying to understand as you're making those transitions, how we might be able to accommodate the intense uses when they're abutting up against some of our neighborhood areas. The development bonus, so we've got the bonus table that's in TOD will certainly be expanded to other similar zoning districts. And so I think right now, the area that TOD covers, the area that would be covered under the UDO would be about quadruple that amount. And so a lot greater area that we would be able to use development bonuses for. But had some comments that wanting to expand that bonus program. So what else can you incentivize in the bonus program to be able to achieve other types of community benefits? So we're looking at that. Affordable housing is always a topic that gets lots of comments. It certainly gets lots of discussion as well. In fact, in our economic impact analysis, there is a separate group just for affordable housing to really talk through how can we reduce barriers to providing affordable housing in development projects. Looking at opportunities to overlap open area requirements. In the draft, it doesn't appear as though you can overlap these. And so really wanting to provide clarity there. And I think there are places where that overlap is, it makes sense and is warranted. And so certainly see some adjustments in the next draft when that comes out. Ed McKinney with CDOT has been before you all with a comprehensive transportation review. That's a new concept, talking about multimodal and how you move people rather than how you move cars. But some concerns about, is that going to be cost challenging for development projects? What's the timeline for getting a traffic engineer that are already very popular these days in Charlotte just because of the development activity? So trying to understand some of the concerns there and how those might be staffed. But lots of conversations about how we transition from today to the UDO of tomorrow. What's the amount of time that between UDO adoption and UDO implementation, because those are not the same thing. You cannot just flip a light switch and suddenly the UDO is active. And so what's the time frame for making those kinds of adjustments? We'll have some preliminary recommendations for that soon as well. Community benefits, there is a community benefits task force that's ongoing, looking at how we might be able to have a greater participation and having the community all be able to experience the benefits of growth, not just in a particular area. And so there's a task force associated with that. And then finally, industrial block links, certainly a topic that was often discussed with the policy map. And I think that's one that we've actually are close to a resolution on as well. A couple key schedule dates. So as I mentioned, the draft came out on October 7th. We accepted comments through March the 18th. As you recall, we extended that, really wanting to allow the community more time to digest the 608-page document. Although a lot of people say that's a lot, it's still a great reduction from the number of documents that we have today, and a lot more in one notebook rather than in like 6 different or 8 different ones. So staff has been reviewing the comments. They've been providing responses, as Mariah mentioned. Some of those just warrant additional thought and community conversation. So there are some areas where we don't have responses yet, but we are working on those. We're looking at a release of the second draft in probably the 3rd week or so of May, hoping to go to City Council for a public hearing in June. We'll come back before the planning committee of this group that month as well. We'll have an adoption draft out in July and hope to get City Council adoption later in July. And I wanted to mention too here that looking to get this council's adoption of the UDO, I think they've spent a lot of time working through things with staff, as has this particular commission as well. And we also think it's important to have this planning committee be the one that recommends that to City Council. But I also wanted to say that we recognize too that, like with the policy map, that this will be an ongoing process. So once the UDO is adopted, hopefully this year in July or August, that we'll continue to update that through regular text amendments, probably on a 6-month regular rolling basis. So establishing the framework, I think, is very important. And then we can start to make changes and adjustments as we learn more from implementation, or as new ideas come our way, or we've got the Community Benefits Task Force, and we've got the 2 new council committees, and we may get recommendations from there that we'll ultimately want to put in the UDO. So just wanted to mention that while we want to have adoption this year, that we understand that it will continue to be an ongoing process. So with that, I think that's it. And I think we've got a whole team of people here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Allison and team. I think that my question is for anyone can answer, but I think you'll probably want to take this one. Can you shed some light on what council members' engagement process is like? What has it been like, and what has the participation been like specifically?
From City Council specifically? Yes. I think that the council participation has largely been at the council and committee phase. We've had, it was funny, we would have a number of one-on-ones with the policy map with different council members. Inevitably, I think in every single one, there's always questions from council members in the UDO, because, and that's not uncommon even in the public too, that, while we might have different project managers and we see them as different, the community is looking at them together. And so certainly had lots of questions and comments on the UDO and those types of one-on-ones as well.
I think I've recently started hearing you say adoption in July/August. I think that's new. What unreadiness do you sense for July adoption, if any?
It's not unreadiness, more so than it's a challenge with the council schedule. And so between trips and the budget presentations, we're not on a regular council schedule for the next couple of months. And it's just hard to find time to get in front of them with all the other topics that are out there. So, and it's meeting the certain requirements as to how long the adoption draft has to be out for public review. So that's really, it's not a hesitancy. It's really more so just trying to fit it into the schedule. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Allison and team? Commissioner Torinos.
Thank you, Allison. That was great. I mean, it's becoming more real and more understandable now. So, but it's still very difficult for our community, and I believe for our city council members as well, trying to figure out, even watching their discussions about the policy part of the UDO and the mobility plan and all of those different things, how they're coming together. So I think the more we hear you, the better, right. We appreciate that. In terms of that community benefits task force, is there an opportunity that they could do a presentation to our planning commission so we find out what the pulse is in the community regarding all of this?
Sure, absolutely. We'd be happy to come before you. I think they've been working through some ideas. They've heard the task force has met twice and listened to everyone in the room and got some ideas, and then went back and they've been talking to the different departments about, hey, I've heard this idea, is this feasible, short-term, long-term? And so just to even get some ideas pulled together and what time frame that they could be achieved. And so we're getting close to being able to articulate what some of those ideas are. And so certainly we can come before this body and give you an update.
That would be great.
Yep.
Thank you.
No hands raised online. Commissioner Gusman.
Thank you. Thanks, Alice. That's a great update. And I think that I still feel we're on track. I hope we can continue to strive towards that. I will say that I'll remind all my commissioners right now might be the best time to be having input on this process. So if there is questions, I know I've talked to a number of our fellow commissioners. If there are things we need to address, if there are things we need to talk about, let's get together with staff and let's get those conversations had. There should not be any reason anybody should hold any comment at this point. We need to create the best document, the best UDO that we possibly can. And one of the key ways to do it is by our involvement. With that said, I hope that we don't run into too much delay between our planning committee recommend and council. One of the things that was a little disappointing on the comp plan was it continued to move after our recommendation.
Right.
And that felt like we probably had an opportunity there to do that a little bit better. So I'd like to see those two documents closer when we get our recommendation when they do. I realize the process and I'm not questioning that. So.
I agree with you.
Yeah. But that was my comments. Thank you, though. I think I feel good about where we're headed. And I know it's still a journey, and our meetings for the next few weeks, the next few months are going to be very UDO focused for everyone on planning committee and on the commission. This is the most important thing we're working on right now.
Thank you, Commissioner Gusman. Allison, did you mention a specific date for the second draft or a specific week in May?
I believe they're targeting May the 25th, but I'll confirm with the team on that.
So that's essentially about 3 weeks prior to planning committee recommendation. Are we attempting to squeeze in any last minute engagement efforts in that timeframe?
I think we're still talking about what engagement would look like. Certainly, as I mentioned, we've got some ideas that we're pretty close to being able to start to circulate about short-term rentals. And so I'd like to start communicating what some of those recommendations are ahead of the draft. And that way we can start having conversations early about, did we get that right? So I think short-term rentals will be probably where we'll start, but then we'll start to look at some other topics as well.
I think short-term rentals, that one was a surprise. I think I've heard you say that, but parking, I think, will be a heavy hit as well. But almost all of the bullet points that you mentioned in that last other topic slide, if we could group that into one session, I have particular interest in the opportunities for overlapping open space.
Okay.
It seems that seemingly in some zoning petitions, particularly, there's some, just want to make sure that there's no intentional manipulation there. And then building height transitions. So those three particularly, I'd like to see a quick hit if possible. If we're trying to squeeze in some engagement efforts, I think it worthy that those few be included as well.
Okay, sure.
Everybody else good? Any other hands raised? Okay, so thank you again, Allison and Team UDO. We'll certainly see you guys next month. And I think that we will be able to give you guys some time back in your schedule today. I just want to go through the schedule for the next several weeks for Planning Commission and its subcommittees. I think so. Is it coming? Dun, dun, dun. This, the schedule for yes. Thank you all for your patience. Don't think there's anything surprising on there. Just wanted to make sure this is all on you guys' radar. I will continue to stress for zoning committee members, it is urgent that you alert right away if you are, if you have a known absence upcoming. Just go ahead and put forth that information as soon as possible. And it's coming, I promise. Okay, again, nothing new. Just wanted to make sure that this is on everyone's calendar. Excited to see more commissioners in the room and hope to have even more next month and the months to follow. It is something to be said, share the energy in the room with you all.
Oh, sorry.
With that, does anybody have anything for the good of the order? Anything else for today's meeting?
Motion to close by Spencer.
Motion.
Second
to
by
close.
Welton.
Second.
Third by
Welton.
Barbie.
Third by Barbie, fourth, fifth, and sixth. Okay, thank you all for joining us again. Enjoy the rest of your Monday.
Thanks, Kiva.
See you, everybody.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you, everyone.